My name is David Dawson, and in 2007, I was nearly burned to death in Iraq. I was working for a DoD contractor on the Iraq reconstruction program. We were rebuilding most of the major infrastructure in the country. I remember kind of vaguely getting into the shower, and really the next thing that I remembered was waking up on the floor of the shower. I do have a memory of looking down and seeing the skin falling off of my legs. I was actually hit by water that was nearly boiling at 200 degrees, as well as steam, which caused me to go unconscious. About 70% of my body was injured, bandaged head to toe, and by the time that they were done with the procedures to graft everything that had, all the skin that had been destroyed, that I was about 98% injured. A lot of the treatment I just don't recall because I was in a medically induced coma. When I got back to the United States, I didn't look really like myself. I had skin grafts on more than half of my body, and the other part of my body that hadn't been burned had been harvested, so I was bright red everywhere. My kids were coming to see me, my wife was coming to see me. When they came into the room, it was almost like they didn't recognize their dad. When I came to Klein Frank, I was at a point in my recovery where I didn't remember most of what had happened. I was in a compression suit designed to help stop scar tissue from growing.
David had been broken. His family was in disarray. His children were afraid of him. And the story about his first encounter with his children was something that was very haunting to him, and he was committed to overcome.
The reports that I was getting back from people who were still in the green zone was that the water was still overly hot. And so really my intention was to see if there was anything that I could do about making sure that it got fixed.
Soon after David Dawson had returned to the United States, he had come to our office and proposed essentially an impossible task to try to find witnesses in a war zone, to try to negotiate with a newly formed government in Iraq, to try to find witnesses who are potentially scattered all over the world, and to try to find out what happened in November of 2007 that caused him nearly to die.
What I know today about why I got burned was a failure in the plumbing system caused by just negligence of maintenance of the system. The company that was in charge of maintaining the housing was Fluor Intercontinental. They're a very large international company. I was scared to go to trial. That whole process made me very nervous.
Fluor hired top-notch attorneys who will stop at nothing to win a case. In fact, their motto is, they don't walk, they run to the courtroom. They are extremely aggressive lawyers. They put, I think, 5 or 7 lawyers on the file from time to time, plus a full staff. And their intention was to bury us, outwork us, and not provide information and make the case as difficult as possible.
Just going back through all of the events that had happened, and by the time we went to trial, I knew a lot more about not only what had happened to me, but what the situation was that led to my injuries. Beth ended up doing, I think that was the first deposition from the country of Iraq ever to make it into the U.S. court system.
Because of my connections in the human trafficking world, we were able to locate some people who had worked in the green zone, and through satellite imaging, we were able to identify, to triangulate and match photographs and find the contractor eventually who had built Freedom Compound and who knew witnesses. And that was no small feat to accomplish. We were able to locate these individuals. One spoke some English, one spoke no English. We had to be very careful about how we communicated, the form of communication, and how documents would be transferred so that the security of these people could be maintained. Because with the rebel forces or the anti-government forces, if somebody finds out that you've been working in cooperation with Americans, you can be killed.
Both Beth and Carrie had done a great job of preparing me, knowing what to do and when things were going to happen and where we needed to be. At trial, Carrie was with my wife and I full-time, which was an enormous help just getting through the process. I was actually asked to leave the courtroom when the primary consulting doctor who was in charge of the medical team in Germany gave his testimony. There were photos shown of my injuries prior to me waking up that kind of put me back into those places, which was very difficult for me.
My skill set is in giving direct testimony. That means I put on people and I sponsor their truthfulness and the health and the completeness of their story and their testimony, and that is a great responsibility.
You could almost see the jury try to catch their breath from some of the things that had been stated in the evidence.
When you're a trial lawyer, one of the things that you want to do is convey the importance of the human experience. And it's not trite and it's not staged, it's experienced. And the only way that you can do it is if you're willing to let yourself be invisible and you're willing to let your client or your witnesses speak their truth. You can talk about things that are so difficult to face as a human being. You can talk about pain. You can talk about transformation. You can talk about joy and sorrow and failure and trying again and all the things that make human beings great. There can be points in a trial where time stops and everyone in the room stops breathing or moving, and all there are in that moment are just the words and the experience, and everyone experiences it together and it's real. In a trial lawyer's experience, that's when we change things for the better, because every single person who's experienced that moves forward in a more powerful way and stands for something better.
I think there was a point in the trial when, in my mind, that there was no way that the jury couldn't find in our favor. When they started going through what their decisions were, it was this immense feeling of relief. It was overwhelming to hear the value that the jury had placed on what I had been through, what my family had been through. $18.78 million, and that felt really good after, well, at that point, what was it, 4 years?
When the verdict came in, I think that David Dawson and Stephanie finally realized that all of their perseverance, their work, their pain, everything that they had been through was worth it, because the jury spoke and spoke loud. They did not like the way that Fleur had behaved, and they did not like the fact that tens of millions of dollars of our taxpayers' dollars was absolutely wasted, and to see the level of carelessness that caused multiple injuries to David and his family all the way down.
It couldn't have possibly been a better experience all the way through. The work that the firm has done has been exemplary, and I don't know how I would have managed just my life without having Beth and Carrie here to take care of this whole process. One of the things that I had decided very early on was that I wanted to give some of the money from the settlement to a foundation that would help both the burn victims and their families. The change for the better is going to be that I know that I can take care of my family and my kids financially for the rest of their lives. When I look at my body now, it just kind of is a new normal. And this is my new normal. My family was told I had a negative 11% chance of survival.
It was an honor to do this case. It was the most difficult case I had done to date, but it's not the most difficult case I'll do in my life. I'm happy to close this chapter because I know that David's going to go forward and do great things with his life. It's not for me about the check, and it wasn't for me about the verdict. It was about the transformation of my client and the fact I know he's got a great future, and that's what makes it all worth it.
Still being here and getting to see my kids and getting to go about my day and being a part of the living is something that I try to focus on more often than what my arms and legs and back might look like. Sometimes bad things or difficult things have very positive outcomes in people's lives. And this was certainly one of those times.